In many cultures, loving sports isn't just a hobby. It's almost an expectation. Game nights, rivalries, heated debates, fantasy leagues, championship celebrations, sports can be a powerful social glue. So when someone doesn't obsess over sports, or doesn't care much at all, it can stand out. But psychologically, that difference is interesting. People who don't obsess over sports aren't necessarily anti-sports. They just don't attach identity to it. For many fans, a team becomes part of who they are. Wins feel personal. Losses feel painful. There's belonging in that shared loyalty. It creates community, ritual, and emotional highs and lows. If someone doesn't feel drawn to that, it often says more about their stimulation preferences and identity structure than about their personality overall. Sports fandom is built on collective emotion. Loud environments, synchronized cheering, fast-paced action, competition. Some people thrive in that energy. Others feel drained by it. Those who don't obsess over sports often prefer environments where the emotional volume is lower. They may enjoy one-on-one conversations more than group hype. They may gravitate toward activities that feel internally engaging rather than externally charged. There's also the factor of narrative investment. Sports are built around storylines, underdogs, dynasties, comebacks, betrayals. For fans, these stories create meaning and continuity, but some people simply don't emotionally attach to outcomes they can't influence. They may enjoy stories, but they prefer ones where they're directly involved. Their own goals, creative projects, relationships. It's not apathy, it's selectivity. Some individuals are wired to invest emotionally in personal growth rather than team identity. Their excitement comes from mastering a skill, learning something new, building something tangible. Competition doesn't energize them unless they're directly participating. In a world where sports often act as a social bridge, not obsessing over them can sometimes feel isolating. But psychologically, it usually reflects independence and interest. They don't adopt passions just because they're common. They follow what genuinely resonates. Another important layer in the psychology of people who don't obsess over sports is how they relate to tribal identity. Sports, at their core, are modern tribes. You wear the colors, you defend your team, you celebrate together and argue with rivals. There's a strong sense of us versus them, even if it's playful. For many people, that tribal belonging feels energizing. It creates instant connection. You can walk into a room full of strangers, mention a team, and suddenly you're not strangers anymore. But some individuals simply don't feel wired for tribal attachment in that way. They may value individuality over group identity. They might feel uncomfortable tying their emotions to something so collective and uncontrollable. When a team wins, fans celebrate like they personally achieved something. When a team loses, it can genuinely ruin someone's mood. For a non-obsessive personality, that emotional outsourcing can feel strange. Why let something you can't control dictate your emotional state? People who don't obsess over sports often prefer areas where effort directly equals outcome. If they work hard at a skill, they improve. If they invest in a relationship, it deepens. The cause and effect feels personal and tangible. There's also stimulation style to consider. Big games are loud, intense, dramatic. Commentators shouting, crowds roaring, rapid movement. For some nervous systems, that's thrilling. For others, it's overstimulating. Those who don't gravitate towards sports may simply prefer quieter forms of engagement. Books, music, long-form discussions, solo hobbies, creative work. Their excitement might be internal rather than explosive. It's also worth noting that not obsessing doesn't mean lacking passion. Often, these individuals are deeply passionate, just about different things. They may pour the same energy someone else pours into sports, into art, technology, fitness, philosophy, business, or personal projects. The intensity exists, it's just directed elsewhere. And psychologically, that shows autonomy in how they choose to invest their emotional energy. There's also something deeper happening when someone doesn't obsess over sports. The relationship with competition itself. Sports are structured around clear winners and losers, scoreboards, rankings, championships. For many people, that clarity is satisfying. It simplifies the world into outcomes you can measure. But not everyone feels emotionally drawn to that framework. Some individuals are more process-oriented than outcome-oriented. They care less about who wins and more about how something unfolds. They might appreciate athletic skill, discipline, or teamwork, but they don't feel the surge of adrenaline when the score changes. The emotional spike just doesn't hit the same way. That doesn't mean they dislike competition. It just means their competitive drive might be internal rather than external. Instead of comparing themselves to a rival team, they compare themselves to who they were yesterday. Their sense of progress is personal, not public. There's also the time investment factor. Sports culture often requires consistency, following seasons, tracking stats, watching games weekly. For someone who values autonomy over routine entertainment, that can feel like a commitment they didn't consciously choose. They may prefer flexible interests that don't demand loyalty. And socially, this difference can create subtle friction. When a group conversation revolves entirely around last night's game, the non-sports obsessed person might feel disconnected. Not because they're antisocial, but because the topic doesn't emotionally land. Over time, that can reinforce a sense of being slightly outside the mainstream. But there's also strength in that. People who don't default to cultural norms often develop strong personal identities. They're used to liking what they like, even if it's not popular. They don't fake enthusiasm easily. If they show interest in something, it's genuine, and that authenticity matters. They may bond over ideas instead of teams, over projects instead of players, over shared values instead of shared rivalries. It's not that they lack community, they just build it differently. At the core, the psychology of people who don't obsess over sports often comes down to how they choose to attach meaning to their lives. Sports offer ready-made narratives, heroes, villains, redemption arcs, historic moments. For many, that shared storytelling feels powerful. It creates rhythm throughout the year. It gives people something to anticipate, celebrate, or debate. But some individuals prefer to create their own narratives instead of emotionally investing in someone else's. They may channel their passion into personal goals, creative expression, career growth, relationships, or learning. The emotional highs they chase aren't tied to a final score, but to personal milestones. Finishing a project, solving a problem, hitting a fitness goal, having a deep conversation. Those moments feel more intimate, more earned. There's also a psychological independence involved. When someone doesn't obsess over sports, it can signal that they're less influenced by cultural default settings. Sports fandom is one of the most socially reinforced hobbies in the world. If you don't naturally connect to it, it takes a certain level of comfort with yourself to say, "It's just not my thing," without feeling the need to justify it. That comfort often reflects a stable internal compass. Of course, balance matters here too. Not caring about sports doesn't make someone more intellectual or more evolved. And loving sports doesn't make someone shallow. Both are simply different pathways for connection and excitement. But what's interesting is how emotional energy gets distributed. Sports fans often externalize emotion, cheering, shouting, celebrating collectively. Those who don't obsess may internalize emotion more. Their excitement is quieter, more contained, sometimes more private. And in a world that often celebrates loud enthusiasm, quiet passion can be overlooked. Ultimately, not obsessing over sports isn't about rejecting culture. It's about selective attachment. It's about choosing where your emotional investment goes. Some people pour it into teams, others pour it into themselves. Both are valid. But understanding the difference reveals something deeper. We all build meaning in different ways, and that diversity of passion is part of what makes human psychology so fascinating.